I'm JB Garrett, radio broadcasting director for My 95.1, and I had the chance to sit down and talk with some former Killeen High School football players and coaches about their time at Killeen High School. Coming up, we'll have interviews with former head coach Sam Jones. We'll talk to Matt and Max Wadaki. Matt Wadaki, a current AP at Killeen High School and former Ellison Eagles student, and his son Max Wadaki playing his final game as a Roo tonight as a member of the offensive line. But for now, a look back at 1,000 games and 111 years of Killeen High School football. Playing their first high school football game just months after the sinking of the Titanic, Killeen High School tonight plays their 1,000th regular season game in school history. 1912 also saw the birth of music and cultural icon Woody Guthrie, the election of Woodrow Wilson as U.S. President, and the arrival of New Mexico and Arizona as states. There are more than 200 high school football teams in the state of Texas that have reached the 1,000 game mark, led by Mart's 1,230 total games heading into tonight's season finale for the Panthers. Killeen's all-time record is 550, 417, and 32 heading into tonight's game against Waco. Starting with that 1912 season's 0-4 record, it would be Saki Hall that coached the Roos to their first winning season 100 years ago in 1923. Coaches with names like Saki Hall, Milton McGee, and Les Peebles led the Killeen football team over the first 20-plus years, but it would be a much more recognizable name, Leo Buckley, that directed the Roos to their first ever district championship and playoff appearance in 1944. Defeating Fredericksburg 40-7 in the bi-district round, the Roos would fall to Gatesville in round 2. It was a decade later that Killeen would make their first appearance in the state championship game at the 4A level, losing to Phillips 21-13. Killeen would earn playoff spots 4 times in the 1950s, 3 times in the 70s, twice in the 80s, and 4 consecutive seasons in the 1990s, including the Roos lone state championship in 1991, along with 9 more playoff appearances since 2000. More than the wins, the losses, the ties, the playoff appearances, district or state championships, it's the people, or in this case, Roos, that make the team's relationship with the city and Central Texas noteworthy. Although Killeen High School has proudly served the families of Fort Hood and Fort Cavazos since its arrival in the 1940s, there's still a small-town quality to Killeen that has kept coaches and players in Killeen after graduation or retirement. Former coach Ed Blomquist.
Well, I was offered a job. Ed Cawley got the head job at Cameron, and he offered me the baseball job at Cameron. But I had just moved, here from college, and I really wasn't interested in moving like some coaches do. And I was in a 4A system at the time, and Cameron was like 2A or 1A or whatever, so I stuck it out here. But it was good for me staying.
Former Killeen coach Jose Salazar.
The kids that I was in the 7th grade with, we graduated together. So most of us were military kids, and yet we stayed here all that time. Like I said, my family stayed here, period. And my dad passed, and my mom's probably going to pass here in Killeen. It's just that big a deal. And in my mind, I never thought I would be here at this age. But, now I'm here. I'm coming to all the Killeen High School football games. I wear Killeen maroon shirt. The pride is big on it.
Former Killeen head coach Sam Jones on why he made Killeen home.
Killeen had rich tradition, left from Nacogdoches, another tough district with Longview, Lufkin, John Tyler back in the day. And then you come over here and you got Temple, Waco, Killeen Ellison. I mean, it's tremendous. 2 tremendous districts that I had a chance and opportunity to coach in. But the reason why I came, I looked at a little film. I had 3 linebackers that I was going to get to coach. Fapoli, Armand, and Leonard Rouse. And they were as good as anyone in the state of Texas at that time in 1994. So I said, hey, I can – with my help and their ability, maybe we can make something work. So I decided to come over and I guess the rest was history.
One thing that makes Killeen unique in comparison to other communities throughout Central Texas is the mobility of students and their families when Uncle Sam says it's time to move. Coach Blumquist.
It's a challenge, because, the Army's going to tell Dad where to go. The military thing was always something that you just had to deal with. I mean, if a kid comes in, and I remember I had a kid in the 7th grade. His name was Steve Brazzi. He was one of the best athletes I ever coached. What a great punter. And he left and moved to Belton. And then he went from Belton to Lubbock. Never made it up to Killeen High School. So you got some of that you have to deal with.
PCS moves are a two-way street, and fortunately for Killeen, state championship-winning quarterback Billy Spiller was one of those that found his way to Killeen via a military move.
I love Killeen. I was born in Bay City, Texas. Moved here. My dad was in the military, and he did two stints here. So I wound up back here pretty much after middle school. But getting down here, going to Fairway Middle School, go Indians. You live and die to be a Roo. You go to the games. They used to let us run through the banner, with the varsity, and it builds you up to that point to where when it's your turn, it's your turn.
Former head coach Sam Jones dealt with not only players moving out, but also getting used to the explosions and the sounds of freedom at all hours.
Well, where I live on the other side of town, close to Fort Hood, I didn't know what the boom was at night. So I'd get up at night, run out the back door, look, and I realized it was Fort Hood. We got lucky. Not many left at the time when I came in from 94 to, we had a few, but not many had to transition out.
Despite the mobility of the student population, there are families that have put Roos on the field over multiple generations, both as a player and as coach.
You get a little. There was a really good athlete here that played for Coach Rogers. His name Ronnie Patterson, and Ronnie was a 3-sport athlete. He played football, basketball, and baseball. And I coached his son, Quentin Patterson, and he was on Coach Bomar's tutelage. And he later signed, after his senior year, I think he signed a contract with the New York Mets. He was a good baseball pitcher and player as well. So, that's a little deal there, Coach Rogers had, Ross was the quarterback. He had another son, Thad, that was a quarterback. He had another son named Tom, who was an offensive lineman. I coached with Tom here on the Lee Bridges staff.
It was the arrival of Ellison High School in 1978 that split the city in two, and it didn't take long for a rivalry between the two schools to develop. Coach Blumquist on the rivalry.
Yeah, you got some long time. One of my good quarterbacks that I had on the junior varsity at Ellison was Brad Buckley. Had a 10-0 JV season with him in 1982 on my, and that, of course, I moved over here, as said, in January of '84. And it was different. People had to decide what they wanted to be. You want to be an Eagle or you want to be a Roo. And
Matt Wadaki, an Ellison graduate and now an AP at Killeen, has a son, Max, a senior for the Killeen Roos football team, and he's seen the Killeen and Ellison rivalry from both sides through the generations.
My dad was a coach at Ellison, and he started here at Killeen High School. And the year that the school split, he went to Ellison. And so he started Ellison when it opened. That was the year I was actually born. And so my entire life, I was an Ellison Eagle, and grew up wearing green and white and going to football games every Friday night, and learning that the grass was green because God loved the Eagles, right? And then very, very quickly learned that the grass was green, but the roots are maroon. And when I got the job here at Killeen High School, was very fortunate to be here as an assistant principal. And of course, now both of my sons are students here. And it's a great experience for us to be together in the same place. My dad started here back in the late 60s, early 70s. And so it's come full circle for our family to have the Wadakis back at Killeen High School.
Billy Spiller's another to see the family split between Roo and Eagle from one generation to the next, and he admits it was tough seeing his son Breezy Spiller slinging the ball for Ellison.
Believe it or not, I cried. It was hard. I got a lot of backlash, but at the end of the day, it's my son. I'm gonna support him. It felt good. Got to still see him play at Buckley and do his thing, man. And reminded me a lot of myself, so it felt good.
The rivalry between the two schools may be approaching the 50-year mark, but to old Roos like Jose Salazar, the bad blood still bubbles to the surface every now and then.
I went to Walmart. I live in Harker Heights. I went to Walmart over there in Harker Heights, and they were collecting money for the Ellison basketball team a year ago. And so I was walking in, and they said, "You want to give a donation?" I said, "I can't." And they said, "Why can't you?" And I said, "Because I can't give anything to Ellison." But I gave him $10. But, going in, I told him no. Coming out, I gave him some money.
Coach Salazar does acknowledge that over multiple generations and nearly a half-century playing against each other, allegiances have shifted from one generation to the next.
I think so. I think most people are for wherever their kids go to school, that's where they, I saw some. The first game I came to at this stadium when I came back 3 years ago, I ran into an ex-player of mine that I know graduated from here, and he had on all green. Ellison was playing at Harker Heights, and I said, "What do you think you're doing?" He said, "My daughter dances for the drill team, and my wife makes me wear green." So, I think pretty much the people are where you grow up or where your kids go to school is where you're going to be for.
The rivalry may have cooled in the community, but Coach Salazar still sees the intensity on the football field.
I came the last 2 years before this year. I didn't see it, but this year I saw a little. Yeah, there was some late hits and some talking and, mouthing and some things that shows that the rivalry's not dead at all.
Coach Blomquist talks about the rivalry extending to the coaching staffs of the two schools with some advice that he was given by longtime Temple High School football coach Bob McQueen.
Coach McQueen told me something one time. He said, we only have to be enemies for 48 minutes. And he's an old Temple boy that graduated around 1955 or something like that, and I'm a Temple graduate. And it's heated, but then after it's all over with, you're back to being friends again. I had a bunch of friends on the Ellison staff that I was really close to. And of course, I had friends over here. Coach Ray, who brought me over in '84, he and I had coached together at Nolan. I was his assistant there for 2 years, and then I was the coordinator there before I went to Ellison. And he had moved up here at Killeen, and we talked about getting back together one day, and so we did.
Former Roos wide receiver Gerald Patterson recalls his team's success against rival Ellison during his playing days.
Oh man, the rivalry between Killeen and Ellison. I tell you what, that was massive. Growing up in Killeen, that was literally everything. Growing up in that community, I tell you honestly, I didn't really know much about any other football outside of Killeen versus Ellison, and so. So let me just start off by saying I never did lose to Ellison in anything throughout my entire 4-year career at Killeen. So that's my good record against them. But it was a very significant game, just in the sense that we always hung out with those guys. We only had one mall in the city of Killeen, so everybody met up there on Saturdays, and so it was bragging rights, for anything, whether it was football, basketball, or what have you. Obviously, this is about football. And so, yes, it was, Friday night, you take care of business, or even if you were at the lower levels when we played on Thursdays and as freshmen, you look for them bragging rights. And I kind of had it on both ends because I was a member. My family was we were all members of a church over on that side, on the Ellison side of town, Persian Park Baptist Church. So a lot of my friends growing up in the church were all from the Ellison side of town. So it just kind of worked out that I was actually successful, because I'm sure I would have definitely had to really catch it at both the mall on Saturdays and then again at church on Sundays. So. No, but it was definitely a healthy rivalry, but definitely an intense one. So, but I appreciate it because just that rivalry alone, we put in the work. Because of nothing else, we knew that's the game we wanted to win. And I remember that being the case my sophomore year on varsity. We didn't have the season we, set out for, but that last game of the year was against Ellison, and they were already they had already qualified for the playoffs, and for us that was our playoff state championship all rolled into one. and we actually found a way to pull off a come from behind victory, and so that just carried into that next year as a championship year. I'm sorry, and so but yeah, that was a great rivalry. I just ended with that.
Patterson feels the rivalry may have cooled with the number of high schools in Killeen and social media changing the way players interact.
From what I had a chance to see, it definitely reduced the intensity. I'm sure the players still felt it because a lot of us would still come back, and coaches allow us to come in and speak to them, and just kind of let them know that they're playing for something more than themselves. It's about that name on their helmet and the jersey, and the people in the stands, and like I said, the people across town. But just from a point of attendance, because Killeen Ellison game, obviously in my time, the entire city emptied out, and everybody was literally at Leo Buckley Stadium. There was on standing room only, and people were in the grass on the sides of the stadium. And going back, like I said, years later, it just wasn't like that. And that was just amazing. That was the first time I went back and it wasn't packed like that. That just blew my mind that a Killeen Ellison game didn't even fill the stands anymore like it once did. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, there's other factors that go into it, having other high schools built. So that also, kind of watered down the intensity of the rivalry as well. So definitely several other factors that go into it. And I hate that for some of those guys because of the fact of, that just being such an important and key component to us growing up. But they've created their own, rivalries, whether it's Shoemaker or Harker Heights, what have you. But yeah, just me personally, I feel like there was nothing, greater than that Killeen Ellison rivalry. And so I think social media definitely has had its effects, both, positively and negatively on that rivalry, though, overall.
The 1991 state championship team, led by quarterback Billy Spiller, running back Dion Marion, wide receiver Gerald Patterson, and others, didn't get off to a fast start, losing their first 2 district games. Here's Coach Blomquist.
Well, you had a lot of hometown people that were from Killeen, and their kids are going over there now, and it's a challenge. I mean, to get the community back together. I know when we won state in '91, we won our first 3 games and lost our game to Temple and Waco. So we were 0-2 in district and ran the table. But we had some people that during that 2-game deal, you had some doubters, and the stands weren't as full, and then we started winning, and the more we won, the more people came, and we had a packed house at the Astrodome in '91.
In addition to a stingy defense, it was Killeen's pass-happy offense that set them apart in an era still heavily reliant on the running game.
Hey, you hit it right on the head, man. I look at this generation and the generations that led up to this point, and I look back at our offense, and sometimes we go no back, 5 wide, and I mean that's kind of hard to stop. You got a quarterback that runs a 4-3. Your running back that's out of the receiver now that's going to have a linebacker on him that runs a 4-3, and all kind of dynamic receivers. It's kind of hard to kind of stop that. So, yeah, I look at it now and say, man, lucky y'all, man. Y'all got it good. So, they added the pistol and all of that up in there, man. So I love it.
Receiver Gerald Patterson talks about going from a 5-5 team in 1990 to state champs in 1991 and feels a win in the Crosstown Showdown closing out the 1990 season may have been the kickstart the Roos needed heading into 1991.
Honestly, what's crazy is that you hear the cliche comments and teachings from coaches of, the season starts in the offseason, or there is no such thing as an offseason. But I can honestly say that offseason really was very different from the season before. And I don't take anything away from that class of, that 90 class that I played with as a sophomore. I have nothing but love for those guys. And we worked hard every day and just fell short, too many times that season and missed the playoffs. But tons of talent on that team. And just some good guys overall on that team, as well. But one thing I do vividly remember, though, was just what we put into that season or into that upcoming season, that off season, was just different. It's I don't want to say it was better or worse. I just know it was more focused. It was just way more focused, and it was so crazy that you say that, because you would think that just seems kind of a jump, to go from 5-5, you didn't even make the playoffs, to we set our goals for winning a state championship. And like I said, I understand that it just sounds crazy to some, but we knew we had talent. But, once again, we were also very good in basketball. We were very good in track. So a lot of us all played all those sports. And so we knew the talent and skill level that we had. I think it was just a matter of, coaches putting everybody in the right positions. And but once again, getting everybody just to be laser focused on understanding the goal, number one, and then understanding what it's going to take to achieve that goal from a standpoint of putting in the work in the off season. And then people don't realize it's it really truly is where you get better, because not everybody's putting in the same amount of work in the off season. And I know we did. We went in overtime in the off season and right into the summer and then leading up to the season. So we were already in rhythm, like the receivers and quarterbacks, and everybody was already working out in the summertime, doing things. So literally, we just rolled right into the season, ready to go. So I think it was just that. But I'm sorry, to answer your question. Yeah, that Ellison game definitely catapulted us into the belief, and into the fact that, look, that's a team loaded with talent, that Ellison team, and we beat them. So we know we're capable of going out and doing, that same thing and then some. And so I know that win definitely led us into that offseason with the, positive mindset.
Coach Blomquist talks about the trouble the Killeen coaching staff faced by running that unique offense.
One of the problems with that team was we were a one-back, and there weren't a lot of people that we were playing that were one-back teams. So we really didn't know what we were going to see defensively a lot of times, because the team that you're going to play may have been playing someone that's wing T or I formation or whatever. So you don't know how they're going to line up to all these wide receiver sets and motions and things. So the first quarter a lot of times was kind of experimental. You got to kind of script plays a little bit and formations and try to get going. But a lot of people tried to do different things to us. San Angelo, for example, they were a 4-3 team, and they tried to play their ends real wide to prevent Spiller from bootlegging and sprinting out. So we just handed the ball off to Dion, off tackle. We run a lot of zone plays and speed option. And we had Billy Spiller and Charles West playing both ways, lockdown corners, and they shut a lot of people down because of their speed and quickness and their talent, coachability.
Patterson enjoyed the opportunity to be on the receiving end of those Billy Spiller passes during the 1991 season.
Yeah, that was definitely fun, to say the least. Once again, we kind of knew, our talent level matched up against anybody. I tell everybody, during that time, you could put us up against anybody, and we knew one thing that the newspaper, obviously all we had to refer back to was the newspapers. So maybe the radio station every now and again, but definitely the newspapers and every news outlet, when they would compare Killeen Kangaroos to anybody, we always got an A+ and the check mark for team speed. Just there was never going to be anybody on the field that could, stay with us, that could run with us. So from that perspective, as far as talent goes, we knew that, offensively, we could outscore anybody. We could run by anybody. And, having Bill throw the ball, having Bill at quarterback, having Billy Spiller at quarterback, that played an intricate part, just because in high school, everything it's not always about mechanics. It's about being a playmaker. And that's one thing Bill was great at, was normally sticking to the play that was called, but he also knew when the play broke down, he was capable of making plays. And at the high school level, that's really what's probably the biggest key component there, is just having a guy that knows how to just tuck that ball and go. And so when you're hoping he throws a bomb for 65 yards, he'll tuck that thing and run it for 55 as well, or 65 as well. So yeah, it was just, I think, just the combination of having that team speed at the receiver and running back positions, as well as having a playmaker at quarterback that understood just the different dynamics and just the just the key factors and being able to simply be able to make a play.
The Roos offense may have been one not seen often in the early 1990s, but they used it to their advantage.
Yeah, we were there were some things that we were looking for right off the bat, and we had some little built-in reads for Spiller and our receivers, and if they were backed off of us 8 or 10 yards, just throw it out there, and they catch and run, And Spiller, for the most part, I graded his film and charted him, and for the most part, he was very rarely under 55% passing for a game. He'd be anywhere from 55 to 68 or 9% a lot of times. And we had scramble rules, so if he dropped back and he's under a little pressure, we had designated places for our receivers to be. And that's why a lot of times he'd be scrambling around and somebody'd come open and they'd dunk the ball. Well, a lot of people will look at that and they say, well, they're lucky. Look at that. That's luck. No, it was practiced. We practiced that and practiced it just about every day. And we had little drills where we'd have Billy sprint out and then we'd give him a command and he'd sprint back the other way. Well, all those people that had run the routes for that particular play, they got a place to be, and they hurried to get there and helped him out a lot. So a lot of those ad-lib plays were practiced. They weren't just hully-gully, lucky sandlot football all the time. That's what a lot of people say when you throw it out there and the guy makes 8 yards. That's sandlot football. Well, if you practice that, that's why some people today, that's their sweep. They just throw it out there in the flat and the guy runs for 8 yards. Well, do you want to pitch it to him and run 8 yards, or do you want to flip it out there? It's 8 yards either way you look at it.
In the years prior to the current overtime rules in high school football, tie games were not uncommon. Killeen's by-district game ended in a 14-14 tie, but the Roos advanced on penetrations.
To tell you the truth, I didn't know anything about penetrations. Coach had us on the sideline and he broke it down to us and let us know what we had to do in order to win the game, which was to at least tie the game up, and we would be winning on penetrations. And luckily, me to George Gooden made it happen.
After that tie, one of the last, if not the last, high school football playoff games in Texas to end in a tie before overtime rules were put in place, the Roos faced tough test after tough test throughout the playoffs.
It was penetrations and first downs, and we were ahead on penetrations. We had to score on a long pass from Billy Spiller to George Gooden in 2-minute offense to tie the game. And then we were ahead on penetrations, and that was the tie. And then the rest of the game, the next game was a 1-point game, and the other 3 were all 4-point games.
Billy Spiller credits that championship team's chemistry for their success.
Most of us ran AAU track, so we played football all in between the breaks of our AAU track practices. So the chemistry from a lot of us was crazy, So I kind of limited it all to just having that chemistry.
That championship run brought the community together, including those watching it from across town. Here's Matt Wadaki.
It's kind of mixed emotions when you're the crosstown rival, but it was really neat to watch those young men. And I can tell you, just being a young athlete myself at that time, the Dion Marions and the Billy Spillers and those guys, they were freaks on the field. They were amazing athletes, and I would watch them as well in track season, and they would just run people like off the track in track, and just amazing athletes that Killeen High School had at that time. It was fun to watch them as a young kid and a young athlete myself. It was fun to watch how amazing those teams were.
One of the things that I've had a chance to talk to folks about is that state championship and how it brought the community together. A lot has been talked really over the last 5 years as that 30-year anniversary of the state championship was approaching, and heard lots of talk about that on the 30th anniversary. But one of the things we keep hearing about is the community pulling together, the bus ride from Killeen down to the Astrodome, and how people were lining the road and waving and waving flags and wishing the Roos good luck. Did that sort of goodwill carry over from the Ellison campus as well? Were you able to put aside that crosstown showdown and root for the Killeen Roos?
I don't know that there were a lot of us maybe on the side of the road waving at them, but I do know that we were supporting them and wanted the best for them, because it was that, at that time, there was no even conversation about a state championship. When a couple of those games in the playoffs, they won, right at overtime and penetrations and just things that aren't even part of the rules anymore. And it was actually crazy because they would come back late in the game and tie it up and then win because they had more penetrations and had gotten inside the 20-yard line more than the other team, and things like that you just don't even talk about in the current game that we play now. But it was definitely I think they were the Cardiac Kangaroos, and they had all kinds of nicknames. And one of my favorite stories is to hear Doc Wilson talk about the police escorts that the team got, and as you're leaving town, everybody's on the side of the road waving as they came back in and just screaming and hollering and honking horns, because it's an experience. It's definitely an experience for our community.
In addition to the offensive firepower over the years, Killeen has had a run of dominant defenses as well.
There were 2 years back to back. Okay, 1980, they were 9-1 under Rex Turner. They give up 48 points for the season. 10 games, 48 points. Killeen, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shutouts. The next year, they were 1981. They were 4-3-3. They gave up 44 points.
Killeen has sent many players onto college and professional football.
One of the best teams that was ever on that field right out there was Gerald McNeil, was the wide receiver. He was all Southwest Conference at Baylor. He played for the Houston Gamblers in the USFL and the Cleveland Browns. Fast, 200 meters, woo, just really fast. And he was a wide receiver. They had 2 linemen. One of them was Mark Addix. He's a big time, his dad was a chaplain at Fort Hood. Mark Addix is a big time knee surgeon and in the Houston area. You see him on TV sometime on the doctors and things like that. And he signed with the Kansas City, I believe it was Kansas City, I can't remember. But anyway, he signed for a big check, pro ball. He played at Baylor. His brother played at Baylor and center for the Chicago Bears. These guys are on the same team, man. And the backfield was Kenneth Hewitt. Kenneth Hewitt went to Texas State. The left halfback was John Walker, went to University of Texas. The fullback was George Liotto. He went to McNeese. And the right halfback was Fred Nichols, who went to SMU. All them guys are on one team. I mean, unbelievable. And but one team went to the playoffs, and they couldn't beat Temple.
Regardless of the record, being a Roo, being from Killeen, is something that changed these players forever. Here's wide receiver Gerald Patterson.
Well, I think that we had some really good coaches on our staff. Coach Billy Hall, Coach Keith Hartness. Those two definitely stand out specifically because I know they cared about us beyond football. Some coaches obviously were just about X's and O's, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what they're there for. That's their job. But there were some coaches that really cared about us beyond football, and they wanted to see us obviously be successful on the field, but they really cared about what kind of men we were being off the field. And at the time, you thought they were just being, just tough coaches or whatever. But you get older and you realize, man, them coaches weren't worried about, they were worried about wins and losses, but man, they were actually worried about us being respectable, and positively impactful young men, you know, in our respective communities. And that's why they were sticklers about saying yes, sir, and no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. They were all about shaking hands, and looking another person in the face, and making eye contact with somebody when you speak to them, and speaking with your chest up and holding your head up, and just creating confidence within yourself, and all that does, it carries over into your adult life, and but then just the team aspect, understanding that most of the things we deal with in life are bigger than ourselves, and if we learn, it's so much more gets accomplished with when you're working with others versus trying to do it all by yourself. And so you learn so much just from that team concept and from the relationships you build with those individuals, with the struggles that you go through in the off season and spring training, and then in the summer workouts, and then through the season, those ebbs and flows of the wins and losses, and those real highs, and then those real lows, all that you share with those same individuals day after day after day. So you really do create a very nice, a very tight knit family structure. And that carries into, like I said, your adult life, and you learn to take, bits and pieces of that and put it into your real, into your adult life, into your daily life, whether it's at work or your family life and things of that nature. So I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for those coaches, and some of them I've been able to keep contact with, be it through social media or what have you. And just, always wanting to just extend a thank you to them for just caring about us beyond the football field, because a lot of times that's not the case. A lot of times coaches literally only want you for one thing and one thing only, because it's about them, and it's about, how they can get their next job, and, squeeze all the juice out of you as an athlete, and then throw you to the wolves. And it's the next guy up, who's taking your place once you're gone, or hurt or out of there, whatever the reason may be that caused the exit. And that's part of the business. Nothing nothing against them. It's because not every coach is in it for that reason. Some of us have to feed our families. Some of us really enjoy leading, the next up and coming generation. Some people just like the science of it all, the X's and O's. Some people, so it's so many different reasons to why coaches coach. And I understand that. So I don't hold any of that against the coaches that weren't in it to make us, decent human beings. But for the few that we had, I'm very thankful and very appreciative to them. So my hat's off to those guys that had an impact in that respect.
Billy Spiller.
Man, Rue Pride, it says it all. We have T-shirts that we used to wear that say Rue Pride is justified, man. And to be able to walk around in one of those shirts, it meant a lot. Looking over, we were a whole different type of team than Ellison. We kind of looked at them as kind of some uppity kind of guys, kind of spoon-fed. But, over at Killeen, we kind of come from the trenches. So I kind of like that. You're around a lot of dogs.
Patterson speaks about playing in Killeen.
Well, so it's kind of funny because, you'd like to lean on tradition, but Killeen is a different city than most cities, in Texas. And I'm just minimizing it to Texas because we're talking about, Texas football, Texas high school football, and, just how monstrous that is. I have friends that have moved here from other states, and they're like, man, I didn't realize you Texas folks really take high school football serious. And I say, yeah, we do. It's a real thing here to dive into high school football. So, but the problem with that is most cities, most towns do. They all have very stable, very structured traditions that last for generations and generations, and passed on to the next. Whereas for us, because you have so many, when we're us being attached to the military, you have so many players that move in and then that move out. And so it's really hard to maintain that. But then there's also the growth because of the military. So we have all these other schools, and don't get me wrong, other cities have done the same thing and have grown and all that stuff. But I just feel like it's just tough for Killeen to really be able to stand on, some of that tradition that was created back when we were there. But I don't know. I think if I had to sum it all up, though, I would definitely say just a busload of talent. Killeen has produced some, and for me, being able to go off and play football and run track and see sports played at the next level and at the highest levels, being able to evaluate talent, I can honestly say that Killeen has definitely been a pool for some phenomenal talent, and I just want to be able to see it continue to grow in that space, of just continuing to produce, just high quality athletes, but more so than anything, just, good, decent human beings that pour back into their communities after it's all said and done. But it all comes from the foundation that was laid during their time playing sports, playing football in Killeen, Texas.
Billy Spiller on why he's made Killeen home in the decades since his time as Rue quarterback ended.
Man, it's been a blessing. That's why I'm still here. I mean, I love Killeen. Killeen's done me great, so I have no regrets. My kids love it. They've succeeded and still succeeding. So all I say is go Rules, tighten up, hold your younger class accountable, and let's get this thing back popping.
We'll be back with interviews with former Roos head coach Sam Jones and multi-generation Roos and Eagles Matt and Max Wadaki.